Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm Lynn Rubenstein. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Recycling Council, and this is a webinar co-sponsored by RRS and NERC about the NextCycle program in Michigan and how it is driving recycling market development. Before we get started, I'm just going to run through some very, very quick housekeeping details, and then we'll get going with our 6 or 7 presenters. We were expecting 7, but one person is at least running a little bit late. Because for the sake of time, we're not going to read the bios, but there is a handout available for that where you can download the bios. And so I'll tell you where you can find that in a second. After the presenters, will ask questions. I'll ask questions because I'm going to ask you to put them in the question box. So where is that? On the top right-hand side of your screen, either you see a dashboard or you see a little orange arrow. If you see a little orange arrow, click on the orange arrow, and you'll see that one of the boxes that opens up says questions. So you hit that, and you type in your question and hit return. So I will be reviewing those, and that's where I'll gather the questions from to ask at the end. Same way, right below questions is something that says handouts. It's got a little arrow. If you click on that, it'll drop down. There's one handout, and you can double click on that, and a PDF of all the presenters' biographies will download. So that will be there. This is being recorded. A recording of the webinar and everybody's PowerPoint presentations will be on the NERC's website by tomorrow. And you will receive an email from GoToWebinar giving you a link so that you will have ready access to that. So again, you're going to ask questions through the question box. You're going to download the bios there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go along, and just as a little heads up, we're going to hear from Matt Fletcher first. He's the Recycling Market Development Specialist with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Our next presenter will be Elisa Seltzer, Senior Consultant RRS, NextCycle Approach to Building Circular Economies. Then we'll hear from Kamal Patel, co-founder and designer from Traversal, utilizing co-design to ensure equity and inclusion. Then we'll hear from Rebecca Hugh, co-founder of Glacier, a NextCycle team perspective, private sector. We'll hear from Brad Austin, the Director of Operations, Marquette Solid Waste Authority, of course, in Michigan, a NextCycle team perspective, public sector. Then we'll hear from Paulina Liung, Chief Sustainability Officer from Mtr, a NextCycle project partner perspective. And maybe we'll be hearing from Lena Zoda, the Director of Sustainability for Pactiv Evergreen. As I say, she was just hadn't yet logged in. But so with that, I'm going to say I'm going to change presenters and give it to Matt, and the rest of us are going to turn our cameras off and mute ourselves. And here comes Matt's presentation. Excellent. It's perfect, Matt. As you're you.
All right.
So take it away, and thank you so much. Remember, questions in the question box.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm really glad to be here today, and thanks for putting together such a great panel. The work that we're doing in Michigan, I'm going to go back to the beginning. You're going to get a preview of my slides here that I'm going to fly through. But I'm Matt Fletcher, Recycling Market Development Specialist with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I've been working for about 20 years to take Michigan into a leadership position in recycling. So many of your states that are represented by NERC have been leaders, and I've learned so much from all of you on how you've grown markets and how you've educated your residents and businesses and how you've gotten the infrastructure in place to make sure that those materials that end up at the curb or a loading dock make their way into new products. And that's what I do in Michigan. I work to make sure those materials make their way into new products. And so Michigan's recycling system has had some past investment. We've had some good stories to tell. And we know that to grow recycling, we need strong infrastructure, strong education systems, and most importantly, really strong markets. We are well positioned to create the circular economy. And we've been able to tell the story to leaders around the state, local leaders and state leaders about why recycling matters in their communities, for their jobs, for their environment, and for the climate. What we did first was we did an evaluation on what the potential was in Michigan. Where can we grow? How much potential is there to grow? We recognize that there's about 6.8 million tons of opportunity being wasted in landfills. About 2.7 million tons are needed more to reach that goal of 45%, and a total economic labor income of $9 billion. These numbers rival tourism in the state. And so I don't think everybody in your states, in my state, really thought about it as the strong economic driver that it is. But we know, if you're on this webinar, we know that it is a strong economic driver. But having the data to tell that story has been really important. And in markets are vitally important to create that demand pull, but also make sure the system is working so that those materials can make their way into those end uses that manufacturers need. So the quality and quantity that they need. And end markets are key for building that market demand. Through our gap analysis that we did through NextCycle, we looked at the current infrastructure in place. We looked at the total throughput capacity. We also looked at those gaps. So we wanted to see where is the low-hanging fruit? Where can we grow this recycling system most effectively? We recognize that curbside recycling is vitally important. The materials flow into the economy and are being made into new products in Michigan. And we have some gaps that we need to fill for the difficult to recycle materials and organics. We evaluated what that throughput was and what the system looks like today. And we noticed that we have a gap of about 909,000 tons per year that need to move into the system so that we can meet our goal. We analyzed looking at where the current infrastructure is and where those gaps are, and looking at hub and spoke systems that could be most effective. And this data has been very useful in the past 3 years to be able to pinpoint where those gaps are and where those investments are needed. Those investments are coming from a mixture of public and private public sources and private sources. And so being able to tell the story about where the need is and how we can all work together to grow the infrastructure has also been important. We also looked at the drop-off sites, noticing that about half of recyclable materials are outside of those traditional programs. And so we evaluated what would happen if we had an additional comprehensive drop-off system that was taking those materials. And organics. We know that we're not going to be able to reach our goal of 45% unless we have a strong organics collection program. So we evaluated what's being collected right now and what is needed. So NextCycle Michigan. NextCycle Michigan has been the tool that we've used to catalyze that investment and growth. It contains 6 innovation challenges. It uses data to drive the I just clicked on something. Can you still see my slides, Lynn? Can you give me a call out? Just 1 second.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, it's I switched away from my slides. Just 1 second here.
It's showing innovation challenge. Okay, got it. Okay.
I was trying to move the way to all other panelists. Be careful when you click on it. It click on that window. It shows that. So I apologize for that. We use data, as I've already mentioned, to guide those opportunities, and we've made the strong connection to climate solutions, recognizing that that is a major driver in decisions across our states, and being able to make that connection, tell that story of how growing this recycling system is a climate solution. Growing those public-private partnerships is vitally important because this can't be done just on the backs of state government or local government. We need private investment, and we need to make the case for that private investment, that those are going to be good business decisions to grow Michigan's recycling circular economy. Equity has been a high priority for us because we want to make sure we create jobs in underserved communities, as well as making sure that everybody has equal access to those recycling opportunities. NextCycle Michigan is collaborative in nature. It's led by Eagle, created with this team with Resource Recycling Systems, Michigan Recycling Coalition, and Centropolis Accelerator. Each of these entities bring a unique set of skills, and being able to do this in a collaborative nature across with our state recycling organization, with experts in the accelerator space, and with the experts that we know are RRS, with their knowledge and experience in designing systems, has been a real benefit to us. So NextCycle Michigan has innovation challenges. We've had 90 teams selected. We're getting more and more applications every day. We just opened up closed 2 new tracks. We're entering into a 2-year extension for this contract, and we're going to be launching new tracks in the coming years. I mentioned partnerships. The partnership portal is vitally important for NextCycle Michigan because what we are doing is we're growing, we're creating those opportunities for others to invest. The partnership portal allows, brings in partners to support the teams and the projects, and we're using data to advance that. We have, we're using the funding that it was through Michigan's Renew Michigan Fund to support micros. Hey, there's my wife. To support small grants as well as large grants, and we're creating NextCycle Michigan is creating a pipeline for better investment of state funds. So what we've recognized, and many of you at states know that sometimes teams need a bit more support to get their idea launched. So providing that technical assistance to them gets better projects and better results. The partnership platform is designed to connect funders and businesses with fundable, actionable projects in this state. And I mentioned equity, recognizing that we need all communities to have opportunities for recycling. We put a high priority on making sure that we have diverse representation and ensure that the funding that we put into place at the state is done with an equity lens. And I mentioned climate. Climate has been a key driver this past year. We've done an evaluation of what that climate potential is. And through Michigan's My Healthy Climate Plan, we have made the connection to what Michigan is doing to benefit the climate, the action steps that we can take that will result in those positive benefits to the climate. And it's really nice to see circular economy and recycling actively worked on through our climate actions. So there we are, Len. That's a quick overview of what we are doing in Michigan. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Elisa. And remember, folks, put your questions in the question box. And Elisa, so let's see, Matt. Not that we don't want to see you, but we don't have to see you. Okay. But we're hoping, Elisa, did you get the? Did you get the little? I'm making you a presenter. There you go. And now we just need to get into slideshow. Great. Thanks, Elisa.
All right, thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you, Matt. I want to pick up where Matt left off in terms of how the Michigan NextCycle program is really centered in climate and the circular economy. And just in case circular economy is a new term for you, here's a handy dandy little diagram where you can see that instead of wasting material causing pollution, circular economy keeps materials and products in use. It's designed so everything is reused, recycled, repaired, returned back to productive use. And And this includes, this really makes a big impact on climate change by keeping materials in use instead of going to landfill. So next slide, please. Are you able to change the slide, or am I doing it?
You're doing it.
I'm doing it.
You're
Excellent. Thank you. Yay. Okay. So the core elements of NextCycle. NextCycle is data-driven. We are really looking at the gaps and analyzing across the supply chain where are the opportunities. We are then bringing in a partnership network of very, just a wealth of communities, public sector, private sector, nonprofit, trade association, collaborators, investors, and change makers. And then the innovation challenges, think of these like incubators or accelerators. It's meeting teams where they are and bringing the technical expertise, the partners, the funders that are needed to grow them to the next level. And these don't work in a vacuum. These are all interconnected. So there are these feedback loops where the whole ecosystem of NextCycle just gets more and more robust. So the teams and the challenges hook up with partners, and then the partners add data, and then the data comes back to drive the projects forward. So it's really implementing solutions in communities, collaborating, and getting those investable ideas where they need to go. So we have 3 different NextCycles currently. There are others in the work, but they're really designed to adapt to different market and state needs. So NextCycle Colorado was our flagship NextCycle, which launched in 2019. There are 24 teams supported, and we are on our 3rd cohort being facilitated. You just heard from Matt about NextCycle Michigan, launched in 2020. 90 teams supported to date, and over 600 million in investment tracked in the circular economy in Michigan. NextCycle Washington was launched in 2022. 26 applications have been received, and this is the NextCycle that introduced co-design elements that we're now integrating into our other NextCycle states, and you'll hear more about that from Kamal in a minute. So the challenge track program, I mean, this is like the secret sauce. This is the really, really cool stuff. No matter what state, no matter what track, whether you're public or private sector, a community or a startup, it's a multi-month program where there is growth planning, whether there's a business plan or a community plan. There's one-on-one mentorship and consulting, so bringing the technical expertise to the table. There's a highly interactive bootcamp workshop where not only are teams able to mingle with investors and experts, but also with each other, and cool collaborations take place. You might hear about some of that from one of our teams. And then the pitch showcase, where they're able to show their goods, getting them into an investable position, vetted and ready to go. The network ecosystem, which Matt mentioned, as well as I, so there are all these funders and partners willing and ready to collaborate throughout the entire program and beyond, really bringing those funding opportunities and next step growth. So what can a team be? A team can be a business, a startup, a nonprofit, a university, a community. We're looking for investable business ideas, communities ready to take that next step in their programs and services. Teams from underserved communities, we're really interested in seeing the growth and filling those gaps. It could be a single company or a group of companies. And sometimes we'll have a company come in from out of state and say, we would love to do something in Michigan, but we don't know the players there, and we can connect them with those partners so that they can put in an application as a team. So NextCycle is all about leveraging partnership and collaboration. And I love to share this. This is from a very old children's book called Swimmy, but particularly for public sector partners, it's really helpful to think about how can we all pull together, and all these little fish making a bigger fish so that they can go out and be successful. I like to think of communities gathering together into a region where they can build on economies of scale and really grow comprehensive and cost-effective programs and services. So the partnership network is very robust. Public and private entities all coming from different places and ready to collaborate, invest, or be part of the circular economy. So some examples, pursuing ready projects. You're going to hear from Paulina about Mtr's MRF and Education Center and the cool things they're doing there. Sponsoring solutions like Washtenaw County, a very populated county in Michigan, where they're offering $50,000 in grant funds to any business that decides to set up in Washtenaw County. Investing in ideas like Closed Loop Partner that has committed $5 million per eligible project in zero interest or below market loans to help accelerate their success. Building a network, you're going to hear from Nick, who, well, you might not hear from Nick, but Goodwill and Hydroblex and DICA, there's a really great ecosystem happening in Michigan that is going to spread far beyond Michigan in the years to come. So what I would like to do is just give you a whirlwind tour in just a few minutes of some of the other teams, just so you can get an idea of the diversity of projects that have been supported. Table to Farm Compost, this is one of our Colorado teams. What they have done, they came in as a team, helped them through several iterations, develop a really robust business plan, help them connect with funding pathways, and they are now the first compost facility in their rural region. Foam Cycle, this is, they have a proprietary process of receiving expanded polystyrene, which is like your food service and other sort of styrofoam kinds of products, densifying them and turning them into something new. They were accepted as a Colorado team, developed and implemented their business, and then joined as a Michigan partner so they could expand their scale and scope outside of Colorado. Wormies, we actually connected with them when we did a presentation on NextCycle at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Spanish, and connected with Wormies through that. They were selected for a micros grant, these small $10,000 grants from the state of Michigan. They were then accepted into the organics innovation track. They then won the showcase and were then awarded $260,000 from the state. There was a lot of technical support for this team, including site design, helping through the permitting process for their site expansion, and so forth. NEMCOG, that stands for Northeast Michigan Council of Governments. This is in Northern Michigan, very rural, very underserved, has this fledgling MRF that is ready to grow, absolutely brand new and a new site, serve the entire region. We've helped them identify multiple funding partners, really growing from almost nothing to we're almost there, they're almost there. Help them with data, feasibility study, state grant funding preparation, match fund partners, and they are very close to being ready to go. So that's an exciting one. InnovaCoat, this is a powder coating company. It's like, what's that? You know, they have an innovative way to reduce and reuse that powdered paint that otherwise would get wasted. So they are accepted into the Recycling Innovation Technology track in Michigan, had a lot of strategic support provided. They came a long way. They actually won the People's Choice pitch and then the overall pitch at Waste Expo this past spring. And they're making huge progress in NextCycle, preparing for success and additional investment. Whoops, Great Lakes Tissue, they're a NextCycle partner. Here's an example. This is a 100% recycled content paper mill. They accept recycled cartons, they make tissue paper, but they had a byproduct from their process that was being landfilled. We've helped them match with two key partners. Carton Council was a committed match support on a state grant. And then we had a team come through the Recycling Innovation Technology track pivot that likes to use waste material to make goods. And so they are both now being readied for funding and are collaborating together. So what does NextCycle success look like? It is really that impact to community, filling the gaps, attracting the investment and the talent, increasing the access, infrastructure, and end markets, closing those gaps, and the whole supply chain is just humming along and growing a robust and circular economy. So it's win-win-win. Success for our teams and partners, supporting a just transition to a circular economy and communities. And with that, I will thank you, and on to the next speaker.
Thanks, Elisa. That was a whirlwind, but wow, a good one. Very exciting. So thank you so much. Next, we'll hear, as was noted, from Kamal, and he is going to speak to us about the co-action model And remember to be putting your questions in the question box. And yes, a recording and all the presentations will be available tomorrow, and you will receive a link. So with that, Kamal, looking forward to your remarks.
Hi, thanks for having me. Love building on this, what's already been said. So yeah, my name's Kamal. I'm in the Washington State area. We've been using co-design to center collaborative engagement to bring in the NextCycle model into Washington State. So we started out with a research phase. We had Bryce and RS come in, and we basically did research on how could we build equitable circular economies in the Washington State region. And in that, we came up with the recommendation that we need a vision to help people move beyond materials. What we learned in the research phase was that there were silos between material economies like circular economy, equitable futures or just transition frameworks, and then climate action, and that these people were wanting to work more closely together and needing to de-silo their movements. So we've kind of left this as sort of a North Star for the work that we were doing in Washington. So it's kind of a grounding. So in order to move beyond materials, we need to shift the model. And so we need to think about material management moving beyond sort of an industrial pipeline model of mass labor or centralized solutions and move towards a more platform model or ecosystem model, which helps, encourage more participation, more inclusion, and more collaboration. But to do that, we need to have a paradigm shift on how we engage with communities in material management work. And so we need a process to do that, and that's kind of why we're using a co-design engagement model. So we're leveraging an existing model. This is one that King County uses and Washington State uses. It's called the Spectrum of Public Participation. And it's a pretty easy to understand model. So on the left, you have sort of your typical engagement models of inform and consult. And those tend to be one-way communication models or engagement. And on the right, kind of in the middle, the involve and over, you see more two-way. And so what we were basically kind of going on was basically anything from the center to the right was more co-design. So we were trying to engage more of that framework as we were doing this work together. And to do co-design, we need a process. So we used a book called Beyond Sticky Notes, and we kind of followed that model to help make it accessible for anyone to use the co-design sort of framework that they have. So, what I'm going to show is kind of the model that we use and the phases that it goes through the co-design process, and then kind of share a case study on how we used it, and maybe people can use it in their own communities. So the first stage was to build the conditions for co-design. So we worked with RS and King County, and we asked, how much time do we have to do co-design? Do we have the budget to do it? And so once we had that clear, we went on to the next phase, and we went into the immerse and align phase. And that was where we kind of understood, like, what problems are we working on? What questions are we asking? The next phase was the discover phase. So what is happening? What is the NextCycle model? What's happening in communities? We then figured out what are the innovations that we can build and design. How do we test and refine those ideas? And then finally, how do we implement and learn? And then the model is meant to be iterative, so you go back to building the conditions. And so that's currently where we're currently at, is we've just implemented a few solutions, and now we're going to be implementing. So, now we're going to be learning from that and building new conditions with more people. So you'll see us kind of walking through some of these phases. So part of the building the conditions, first we defined what co-design was. So it's a participatory approach to elevate the voices and contributions of people with lived experience. And we defined lived experience in this case as centering equity and circular economy. And then climate change was a part of that. Climate change and sort of people who are connected to that. The co-design team structure was a small circle of 15 people from different perspectives, which I'll show in a moment. There was a large circle of people who we kept informed, and then the outside there was conveners like myself and RRS who convened these meetings. There were a series of meetings. The people in the room, in the small circle room, were kind of with the hat of deciling perspectives and lived experience. So the people had perspectives like, zero waste or just transition or climate action, or a combination of those. And the other key piece that we brought, and this is a key innovation we're bringing to Washington, was we went beyond just a public-private model and we added community as a third sector. And so these are folks from underrepresented communities or people who aren't usually involved in an early engagement with material management. So those are the folks in the room. The people focused on the co-designers focused on one basic area. Why isn't there equitable circular economy, i.e. recycling, reuse, compost, support for organizations and businesses? So this is something we found with research, is that this is quite the gap and we need to learn how to do this. So this was part of kind of setting the conditions and now moving into aligning. So the next phase, problem alignment process, what we learned through a mapping process was that social governance and economic issues were clear needs for design interventions. So you can see on the right, most of the problems that people indicated were more in the social governance and economic areas. So those are the kind of the interventions that we focused the most on when we worked together with the NextCycle model, which you'll see in a moment. So then we went into discovery phase with the co-designers. So we looked at the NextCycle model. We also looked at in the context and conditions in Washington. And so we're really just trying to understand the different pieces of the puzzle. So the NextCycle model was, basically someone coming in to discover what NextCycle was. They go through an application phase. They then go through a selection phase and finally a funding and support phase. And so that's clearly an economic intervention and really systemic in a lot of ways as well. Where the social and governance piece comes in is at the edges. So NextCycle also has a partnership program, which you've learned about, as well as a collaborative governance program. So in the interventions that we did and the innovations we did with community, those are the places where we've started. And so you'll see now some of the innovation areas that we've kind of focused on. So the first one, I have 6 basic sort of priorities that the community came up with. So first, accessible communications for overlooked audiences. How do we help people understand what NextCycle is, what circular economy is in a clear way? The other is, how do we lower barriers to improve applicant outcomes? So these are all priorities, and then under each priority we had multiple tactics, but I'm going to stay kind of high level here. How do we support a robust partner network of those doing the work? Key phrase of those doing the work. How do we improve resource access for overburdened communities in the selection phase? In governance, how do we share power with community? And then the last one, through the whole process, and even at the end when we're going through the funding and support phase, how do we strengthen local community networks? So these are the basic sort of priorities and values that we're kind of bringing into the NextCycle Washington model. And to close, in the sort of the final implementation phase, what we learned is that we want to help simplify the message. So we're implementing priorities and tactics as building blocks to help communicate this complex, these interventions more simply. So in essence, circular economies and equitable circular economies is a systemic issue and systemic change, and it requires systemic solutions, which is inherently complex. So how do we use the idea of metaphor building blocks to make it a little easier to understand for communities? So here is the NextCycle sort of core model. There's a partnership program, things like one-on-one support or a business accelerator, and then also a public-private governance model. But for Washington, what the innovations that we're really wanting to bring in is how do we add to the model and really fit it into community needs? And so here's a few implemented solutions that we're building. One clear thing they asked for was 50% community on program governance to help share power. So we really kind of bring in the community voice to have a bigger role in engagement and the work that we're doing with NextCycle, and then using people who are in the public-private space who have the technical knowledge of circular economy to decide what projects go through and what projects get selected. So there's a balance in how people are involved. And then on the partnership program, communities have asked for a peer-to-peer application support network. So how do people who are usually hearing no or self-select out of applying for grants, how do we help give them a support network to really kind of engage with the application in more accessible ways, specifically with adding peer-to-peer support. So in closing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to add these building blocks and, like accessible communications to help people understand the NextCycle model and how it offers a clear kind of core to building an ecosystem of engagement, of community support. And while doing that, it helps create more equitable circular economies because you're actually building the building blocks for more engagement in the community. So I think I'll end there. I'm grateful to be part of this project, and thanks for your time.
Great, wonderful, really interesting. Thank you so much. And next we're going to hear from Rebecca. Let me just make her a presenter. Rebecca is the co-founder of Glacier, and she's going to give us a private sector team perspective. So Rebecca, you should be good to go. I don't see your presentation. Yep, I think we're getting there. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Rebecca, and as Lynn mentioned, I am the co-founder of Glacier, where we're building technology to help end waste. We participated in NextCycle Michigan's inaugural RIT track last November. And so I'm here to share a little bit more about specifically, what it is that we're building and how we've seen a lot of the benefits already of working with NextCycle Michigan, Michigan Eagle, and other stakeholders. So to start, I'd love to share a little bit more about who we are and what we're trying to achieve. We are a company that's actually based in San Francisco. We're about 3 years old, and we're definitely still a startup. Essentially, our goal is to take a lot of engineering and business talent from some of the top universities, companies out there, and really bring that brain power to bear on developing technology to help the circular economy advance its mission. I actually left my previous job, and my co-founder Arib left his job as an engineer at Facebook, and we were both trying to think of ways to essentially step in and use our skill sets to help mitigate some of the effects of the climate crisis that we're currently facing. So we both knew that we wanted to do something that had not only a direct impact on climate change, but was also the sort of problem that we could tackle using existing technology and commercialize and roll out pretty quickly. So both of us stumbled upon recycling as just this really fascinating, perfect storm where we felt like we could apply things like AI and robotics to actually make a difference on a matter of, a couple of years rather than decades. So that's what we've been working on. And essentially, we started out our design process by talking to a lot of MRFs. We talked to dozens of MRFs and essentially just did these interviews where we asked, what are your biggest pain points and what do you wish technology could do for you? At the time, robots were just getting their footing within the recycling industry. And what we heard was that a lot of the robots on the market are doing really phenomenal things. There's a lot of potential in automation, but that for many MRFs out there, the current robots on the market are basically too expensive and too physically large for the job that they do. For those of you in the audience that have been in MRFs or that currently work at MRFs, you know that space comes at a premium. And so a lot of MRFs told us, if you can design a robot that is significantly lower cost and that can also fit into more nooks and crannies of our facilities so that we can deploy it faster, that would be a home run. So that's exactly what we did. This is essentially the robot that we've been building over the past couple of years. So as you can see, instead of being that typical 8 to 10 foot long footprint, it's only about 3 feet wide, which is essentially how much space you would typically allocate to a sorter. What we have here is this AI unit up front that can essentially live detect what's on the belt and figure out this is a PET bottle, that's an HDPE, this is an aluminum can. It then transmits that information to the robot, which is a little bit downstream, and then this robot is able to go after those items and sort them into the correct location. On the computer vision side of things, the general heuristic we use is if a human eye can detect a certain type of item, we can train our AI model to do the same. We have an in-house AI team that's working on kind of building out this list of commodity categories that we know MRFs and other stakeholders in the circular economy care about. So we've already kind of made our way through a lot of the highest priority commodities that we've heard of from our customers, and we're constantly building out this list. And then just wanted to show a little bit of a demo on the robot that's actually in action here. Excuse me. This robot is actually on a PET line after an optical sorter, and it's sorting out thermoforms. And you can see both of those arms working back and forth to essentially decontaminate this PET line. We've also deployed our robots in several other use cases. You've seen some of them on the prior slide, but our robot has gone after everything from thermoform to PET bottles to HDPE, cartons, plastic film, black plastic, the list goes on. We're excited to continue making this equipment even more robust and deploying it into a wider variety of settings in the coming year. So that brings us to our participation in NextCycle Michigan. For context, Glacier is actually headquartered in San Francisco, California, and we were introduced to the folks at Michigan Eagle through, I guess, a mutual connection and an industry player that we're familiar with. For us, you know, being primarily based in California, there was an open question of how do we thoughtfully expand our geographic presence into other areas. We're in what I would call late stage product development. And for example, we here in Northern California have the great benefit of this sort of perma weather, right? Everything's always beautiful all the time. So it's really valuable to us in this stage to understand, you know, if we're building this robust industrial robot, how does it perform when it's 20 below zero and there are ice storms? You know, I grew up in Chicago, so I'm very familiar with the range of weather that exists out there, but we really want to kick the tires on our system and get it working in as many different environments as possible. And so we decided to apply for NextCycle Michigan with 3 goals in mind, as you see here. The first is to establish more industry partnerships. And this is particularly within the Midwest and within Michigan State in particular. The second is access to technical expertise, and this comes in 2 forms. One is the core technology of our robot and our AI, getting more R&D support with that development. And the second is more industry specific. So can we work with folks who have been in and around MRFs for decades, who have worked with other types of automation equipment, and who can give us more perspective on what it takes to really successfully deploy this type of automation into the MRF environment. And then finally, we wanted to identify new pilot customers, particularly in a new region, as I mentioned earlier. And so long story short, our participation in NextCycle really helped us achieve all 3. I'll speak to each of these briefly. On the topic of industry partnerships, we were able to work with RRS as well as Eagle through a lot of our participation in NextCycle. We've also, we've also been able to get the participation of several third-party funders like the Carton Council and the Food Service Packaging Institute on the application that we actually submitted for Eagle funding at the end of our participation in NextCycle. There's a ton of technical expertise that went into helping us out with the project. 2 that I'll note. One is Centropolis Accelerator. We've been working extensively with the team at the accelerator to essentially map out new R&D projects to further the performance of our robot. And then RRS has really been instrumental partners to us as well. We've worked with several folks on their team to understand kind of the latest and greatest perspective on robots within the industry, to do site walkthroughs at MRFs and help us understand, you know, what are some of the unforeseen complications we might encounter as we deploy our robots into these new environments. And then finally, identifying new pilot customers. This was also very successful as a result of our participation in NextCycle Michigan. We ended up submitting a project for an EAGLE grant in participation with 2 Michigan MRFs. This would involve the deployment of 2 robots, one at each of these facilities. Collectively, these 2 MRFs serve 12% of Michigan's population. So even as an initial pilot project, we're really excited to bring a lot of value to the state of Michigan. And then finally, just to quantify the impact, the successful deployment of these 2 robots will recover an estimated annual 500 to 900 tons of material. So we're really excited to hit the ground running with this project, and we hope that it essentially forms a case study for the successful deployment of Glacier's technology across the state. And that's something that very much the NextCycle program has enabled for us. So in conclusion, I would love to chat with anyone in the audience who has questions about Glacier, NextCycle, the technology we're building and deploying. Feel free to reach out to me at rebecca@endwaste.io. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lynn.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. That's wonderful. Next, we're going to hear from Brad Austin, who's trying to do more than one thing at once. Director of Operations at the Marquette Solid Waste Authority, and he's going to give us the public sector team perspective. Terrific, Brad. We see your slides, and the floor is yours. Can't hear you, though. Are you speaking? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Good. Lynn, thank you so much. And yeah, what a great panel, and I appreciate the opportunity today. As a public sector partner, and really today I represent not only part in Marquette County in Michigan, where our regional MRF is located, but really across the entire region. It's slides here. Let me see. So a little bit about us, Upper Michigan. A lot of rural communities here in the UP. Marquette County proper is about 65,000 people, and in the entire region, there's about 250,000 people. Within the county itself, it's a 23 municipality government authority, 19 townships, 3 cities in the county of Marquette. We do have a single stream MRF here, a regional facility that was constructed in 2020 and came a little bit before NextCycle, but kind of got built in the same way. We had a lot of partners, and we had a blended funding approach to include the state of Michigan and the aforementioned closed loop partners. And we built this facility with the idea that we would have regional capacity for more recycling in our region of the state. So there's 6 tracks, as Matt said, in NextCycle, and I really want to focus on 2, and I guess I'll call it the rural 2 track, because really I2P3 and RSC, recycling support chains, are really the 2 that have had the most impact on us, and cultivating partnerships, as it's been mentioned several times before. And ultimately want to try to establish and improve recycling collection and processing end markets for recyclables for recycling materials in the region. But really, the NextCycle effect, and I guess before I go to the next set of slides, is Matt had talked about earlier about how the state goals and his role in this, and I think this is one of these projects where you can see at the local level, you're watching what the state is doing, and the efforts that you're making are directly, having an effect on what the state goals are. And I know in a lot of projects or programs, throughout the state, the local governments may not feel they can see it or they can't relate to it. This is one of those ones where you can really see state efforts being made, and then as a local unit of government or a regional government, your efforts, you're seeing those things come to fruition. So what I did here is I took a couple of the things from the recycling supply chains, and it talks about establishing, improving, and expanding collection. And before you do that, some things that this NextCycle Michigan program has established is the relationships and partnerships which have already been talked about, both public and private, but community identities from a rural perspective. You know, communities have a lot of pride and they want to have their own thing. And I think that, you know, you can still have your identity, but there's a understanding that's starting to formulate that we have to operate in a regional function in order for things to be successful. Included in that is a voice, as a forum. People now are being heard in rural communities across the state in an effort to improve recycling in their area. And then we're finding the mutual needs and the importance of collaboration. We find this a lot when we first started a couple years ago, you know, kind of in our journey with the regional MRF, as everybody kind of wanted to covet their little amount of material, and, you know, quickly understood that, again, you have to collaborate in order for these things to be successful, in particular in a rural area. It's also improved the level of engagement. I don't think that I can, in the last 20 years that I've been with Marquette County, remember the time when the level of engagement has been higher in recycling, both at the state level and the excitement at the local level. There certainly has been an increase in industry knowledge. People understand things better, things like transfer station and maybe how they're designed, and just you're able to have these conversations with a lot of people in the region who are looking to improve their own system. And then communication amongst public entities, which I referenced earlier. There is a page that's turning in rural Upper Michigan that, hey, in order for us to have an impact, to move the needle, to increase the recycling rate in the state, that we really are going to need to work together. And NextCycle and its project, its program in Michigan certainly facilitates those activities. And then finally, it's expanded awareness across the region. Very linear here in certain parts. We buy it, we use it, we throw it away. And as Elise had put in her diagram earlier, really trying to become more circular. Certainly opportunities to work collectively in the future. Today, we're talking about recycling, but in our region, things like scrap tires and household hazardous waste and programs that are not accessible to those communities. We really believe all of this can become a springboard to assist in making those programs better across the region also. And then the last one here, expanded the Recycling Champions Army, and these are the people that really make the chains turn. These are the folks that are willing to work the Saturday down at the farmer's market. They're putting in the hard work, they're getting the word out, they're talking about what you accept at your MRF. I see this growing in our region, and it's because there's a hope that there's an opportunity to improve. We've got infrastructure. Now we've got this NextCycle Michigan program that's allowing us to do all these things to establish, improve, and expand the collection and processing and end markets of recycling material. So to close, you know, it's supporting regional growth, and NextCycle offers many things. And Matt Fleck said it very well along at the beginning of this. He said it is a pathway to funding, services, expertise, funding available. Resources that maybe, you know, municipal governments don't have access to. NextCycle Michigan can provide these opportunities. And certainly a change in public perception, and depends where you are. Recycling is not new, but I will tell you in our region, it has been very new to a lot of people. But programs like this and talking about and having these discussions at the local government levels has really changed public perception on recycling and materials management. The action steps forward and real change, things like surveys that we're seeing in these small communities that, you know, the residents are reaching out saying, hey, this is something that we want to do, talking to their local government decision makers in an effort to move towards real change. And we're seeing reasonable and achievable goals throughout the process, bringing their ideas and working together with all these different experts to find something that allows us to define victory. Maybe it's a drop-off location, or it's a transfer station that allows multiple drop-offs to come in. And in some cases, maybe it's curbside carts. But nonetheless, it's something that we remind the folks that we're working with that we need to make sure that we're staying in a reasonable, achievable frame of mind. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's more and better recycling, which, you know, in turn may feed that material to the regional infrastructure MRF here, or depending on where it's located in our region, it could go to another facility. And at the end of the day, if we're recycling more and recycling better, all boats will rise and the recycling rate in the state of Michigan will increase. So again, appreciate the opportunity to present today. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. It's exciting to hear such success in a rural area. Great model, great model. And so now our final presenter, before we get to the exciting question and answer period, is going to be Paulina Liung. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer with Mtr, and she's going to give us a project partner perspective. And we see your slide perfectly. And Brad, if you want, you can turn off your camera. There you go. And thank you, Paulina. I'm looking forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for the invitation today. And as the last speaker, I feel a little bit of pressure, so hopefully I'll deliver. So Mtr Group, we are a Canadian as well as a Michigan circular economy resource recovery company. Our roots are definitely in Canada, but Michigan has been a very important part of our journey in terms of leveraging the experience of recycling across the border. So a little bit about our group of companies. We were founded in 1976 by my mother. In rural Canada. And since then, we've grown to 6 different divisions. Between the 6 different divisions, all of them are participating in some part of resource recovery in the local communities, from picking up waste, food organics, yard waste, to batteries, used tires, non-hazardous liquid waste, and of course, our blue box materials. We are doing this with over 600 collection vehicles, and I'm very, very happy to say that we have our very first electric vehicle that we're hoping to put on the road either at the end of this year, probably in the middle of a snowstorm, or early next year. We have about 40 locations across our network. We collect and manage about 500,000 tons, and that's Canadian metric tons there, but similar enough to short tons. And we are about 1,100 employees strong. One thing that's going to be very important for the next 40 years, or for the next few years, I should say, in our journey is pivoting definitely from just simple resource recovery to a more well-rounded circular economy business model, and doing that in a way such that it represents, our workforce and our communities. This year, we just launched our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We're now creating our roadmap, a multi-year roadmap, and putting together kind of our actions for the first year. So I'm personally very excited that, in 1 year we can see an electric vehicle and also participate in some meaningful work in DE&I in our company. So we have 4 locations in Michigan, and our newest location is located in Lansing. It's a single stream material recovery facility located in the heart of the state. And our vision in creating this was to create a modern, efficient, multi-material regional recycling hub. And each of those words were chosen with a lot of thought, from the word of regional, being located in the heart of the city or heart of the state. Within 2-hour drive, we can access 90% of the population. And going back to Kamal's point about access and equity, to be honest, I'm not sure if just because we're located centrally, I don't know if all communities are able to access our recycling facility. But being modern and efficient are very important, because these days we as an industry are very much lagging in terms of the types of packaging and paper products that are being put out into the marketplace. And so with that kind of lagging status on the value chain, we have to be efficient, and we have to be able to adapt to the sorting requirements, which touches upon what Rebecca was saying and what her company is doing in that respect. So here are some pictures. Of course, you don't see a big panned out picture of our facility. MRF operators guard those images because we think it's very special and highly confidential. So we'll show you some snapshots of some of the new equipment that we were able to obtain through Eagle's Recycling Market Development Grant with the assistance of NextCycle Michigan and RS. So some of these pictures show a glass cleanup system. And then, of course, on the right, we have a robot that's focused on certain types of packaging, which I'll go into a little bit further. We started this facility really during the heart of the pandemic. This this equipment was put together in 2020, installed, and that was when really the world was so uncertain. And quite honestly, I'm surprised that we got it off the ground and opened in February 2021. So I'm still very grateful for the team who did that and our partners who supported us during that time. So I broke out my presentation in terms of the support that NextCycle has provided in 2 phases. So phase 1 was really getting the grants through the, the Michigan Eagle Recycling Market Development Grants, and we were able to be connected through NextCycle and RS to several key industry trade associations, FPI, GPI, or that's the Glass Packaging Institute, and Carton Council. And from there, we were able to acquire additional MRF sorting equipment. So we received 2 pieces: a robot to expand the range of recyclables collected, but with a specific target on food service packaging. So that includes cartons, cups, just any kind of like convenience food packaging that we all generate every day. And then the second major piece of equipment we got was a glass cleanup system, and that is to get it to the state where it can go to an actual glass end user. And so that kind of leads to the results. Our glass cleanup system achieved the Glass Recycling Coalition Silver certification. That has allowed us to access glass and markets that we would not have been able to, one of which is using our material as a feedstock to produce new container glass. So I think in that sense, that is probably your most perfect circular economy example, where you're going from packaging to packaging without any loss of value. But that's just one example of a circular economy. We've also contributed to helping to create a strong local hub and spoke network where recyclables can be collected and then processed centrally. So in my second slide where I said the vision of being a hub, that's truly what we tried to do. We built it larger than what we actually needed it for to service some of our closer communities, because within a 2-hour driving distance, that is almost kind of like the secret sauce for how far do you really want to transfer materials and be able to make a couple of hauls in a single day. And so our goal is to now expand our partnerships with both public and private transfer stations, smaller MRFs, where they may not have the resources or ability to be sorting out various types of like cartons and other materials that are growing in the recycling stream, but difficult for a standard or a lower tech MRF. And so in those cases, by partnering with us, their trucks can still collect the broad spectrum and then bring it back to a central consolidation facility, and then it goes to us for processing. And of course, as the requirements for the grants, we had to work hard on promoting and educating our communities and our partners around the facility about how to recycle right, what are the acceptable materials. And in this case, we've got a lot of much needed assistance from RRS and NextCycle as well to help expand our messaging. And I think, especially learning from Kamal's presentation, I still think we have a lot to improve in terms of how we get that message out, so that everybody in a community, regardless of reading levels, English as a second language, are fully aware of what's recyclable and what's not. So phase 2 of our NextCycle support, we're kind of like right in the middle of it. And phase 2 is broken out into 2 parts. So the first part is to build a care center, which stands for the Capital Area Recycling Education Center at our MRF. And I have to admit, as a MRF operator, a collector, being an educator for the public is not our specialty. And this is where we've really relied on NextCycle and the partners that they're bringing together, including the communities in which our facility is located, and to help come to the table and help us think about what will make our space meaningful and useful for the community, which includes education, the education system, businesses, the political community, but also civil society. So for part 1, it's really just building out the box. Our facility is located in a brownfield site. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of cleanup, a lot of demolition and removing of things to be done. And through NextCycle, we've been able to secure $320,000 from Eagle, from various brand owners, trade associations, even downstream markets. And then once we're able to create that kind of modular space, part 2 will be to kind of fill out the insides. And so some of the things that we're thinking about now is, well, how do we future-proof it? Some ideas that we're exploring would be, well, how do you not actually have too much fixed kind of infrastructure attached to the walls? How can you make it as a blank slate as possible so that you're using technology that's available and that will change over time to project different things on those walls, as an example? And you can see in some of those images, that's exactly what those facilities are doing. And then in terms of leveraging our brownfield site, which is large, is creating an interactive drop-off multi-material depot. Some things that come to mind is, how can we make recycling easier using, readily available technology, as Rebecca has said, to help consumers that come to the site, hold up a container and then have like a robot that will say, well, this is what it's made of. These are things that it can be made of in the future, or it can be used to make, and just simply put it in this bin. So those are some of the things that we're exploring. And I personally have to say, I'm very thankful to be, a panelist, because I have learned so much from my fellow panelists. And I really hope that as we go through, part 1 and part 2 of the Care Center, that we can learn more about co-creation, co-development, because I truly think that is something that we have not thought about so far in this project. So, benefits of NextCycle, I didn't put on the slide, but I think it's worth mentioning. Recycling has always been hamstrung by landfill economics, and the support that Eagle, NextCycle, RRS, the other partners that are being brought to the table, including brand owners and trade associations, it really helps to level or better balance the economics of landfill decisions, diverting materials to landfill versus going through all the effort to create basically raw materials that can go back to our circular economy. So I think that is like benefit number 1. But some of the other key benefits of being a part of this program is, being connected to private sector funds with users of those funds. So in this case, us. Even though we are private sector, there are things that a private sector organization won't do without additional outside support. And just because that we've been recycling since 1976, being a part of this program has definitely helped us accelerate some of our ideas. And that goes to the second point. Being a part of NextCycle has helped us accelerate some of the ideas through industry connections and their work in other markets. The team at RRS, I would say second to none in terms of the knowledge that they have about everything from markets to technologies to promotion, education to new models of thinking, and I found that tremendously useful. Being a part of the program has also helped us scale. I think we're just one of them, and I think if you looked at all the other case studies on the NextCycle website, you would see that helping recycling supply chains adapt to ever-changing packaging and policy objectives. So Mtr, we are service providers in EPR jurisdictions, shared responsibility jurisdictions where it's a bit of a free-for-all where anything can happen. So we're trying to design MRFs where a recycling rate could be 20% to places where the objective is 60%. And working with NextCycle helps us kind of make those decisions of, okay, where do we want to put some investments? Where do we see the ball moving to? And then finally, helping to increase local economy resilience and sustainability. In this case, I'm specifically talking about the net new jobs that are created. Our facility has created about 20 net new jobs in the Lansing area, but also broadly speaking, to be able to generate raw materials that the domestic manufacturers can use. I think with the current global and context, I think that's extremely important, and it's something that I think the circular economy can help everybody contribute to. And that is the end of my presentation.
Great, Paula. Wonderful, thank you. So at this point, people can put in a few more questions if they want. We certainly have a number of questions. So I'm going to start there, but ask all the presenters to turn their cameras on, so it's not just me that we're looking at. Thank you for being brave there. Great, everybody. So lots of questions, and I think I'm just going to start initially, Elisa, with some overarching questions about the program. And of course, everybody can chime in. but we have specific questions for everybody as well. So something that Paulina said right towards the end of her presentation, actually, this is my question. Is there a way in which either the teams within a NextCycle, for example, in Michigan, or the teams across the various NextCycles, do they collaborate? Do they learn from each other? Is there any sort of cross-pollination going on?
There's been quite a lot of cross-pollination, and we really want to see more of it in the future. You know, hearing all the incredible, you know, forward thinking that Kamal brought to co-design. You know, I literally heard from Matt during the presentation, I want more of this in Michigan. Like, that's a great example of like, we want to continue improving and growing NextCycle so it's more, you know, it's better benefiting everyone. I think that, so there are numerous other examples. There's another team from Colorado called Vartega that does carbon fiber recycling. And when they heard we were starting NextCycle Michigan, I heard from that team and they're like, what's happening in Michigan? How can we connect? And one of the founders is actually from Michigan, so knew the landscape pretty well, just didn't know how to get in. And I think they ended up securing a market development grant from Eagle as a result of that. Yeah, so there, you know, I'm sure Matt has other examples, but.
No, that's great. I wanted to bring up Vartega in the carbon fiber recycling space. Just bringing that innovation, the innovation in recycling that's happening right now, being a place where we have this network where we can support teams like that. When we met them in Colorado and said, hey, let's do something in Michigan, we could plug them in very quickly to the support network, to the funding. And that's what made it so that project went really well. And we just closed out that grant and we're looking at the next project.
Great.
And another, you know, from the partner side and the funder side, for a closed loop partners or a carton council or an FPI, like, they function across the nation. So for them to see something that provides some consistency for a way to plug in different states is a real benefit to them. So we've seen that kind of catalyst happening as well.
Great. Well, that's, in fact, Lisa, you anticipated the next question. So what types of sponsors are you seeing and what motivates them?
Wow. So lots of different sponsors and funders. You know, I gave an example of a public sector one with a county that wants more businesses engaged in the circular economy in their region, and they're willing to offer grants. Any team coming through could secure a grant if they bring their project to that county. We've got trade associations. So Carton Council is a great example. They want to see recycling of cartons and the infrastructure to do that across the country. And so they're ready to invest. You've got so many, both private sector and public sector, applying for state grants where they don't have the match funds required. And so these trade organizations like FPI and Carton Council and the Glass Packaging Institute stand ready as NextCycle partners to help provide that match funding for a startup or a community where they could not get those dollars together. And this is exactly, if Matt wants to comment, what the state wants to see. The state cannot fund all infrastructure across the circular economy on their backs. They want to see the state funding leveraged.
Yeah, that's a major part of our investment, to bring in additional dollars and making sure that we're a place that we have actionable teams and projects that can be invested in. You know, we're operating in the landscape that all of the same you're all operating in the Northeast, thinking about the recycling partnership and thinking about you know, closed loop partners and their funding investments, and making sure that we're working directly with the trade organizations to support actual projects that we can move quickly. So we want to move these projects from idea into funding as quickly as possible, and that's what they want as well. So the landscape, as you know, has changed pretty dramatically with the additional people wanting to see the circular economy succeed. And so now it's this competition of how can we create a system that really moves it quickly, and that's what we're working on here in Michigan.
Okay, great, thank you. So Matt, there was some specific questions for you. What are the new tracks that you're planning on rolling out?
Yeah, so we're just getting into our extension process, so we're working on that, and we just started the next the RIT track, the Recycling Innovation Technology track, and the flows, as we call it, or the organics track. And so I think that one of the things that what was, I think, unique about NextCycle and the way we designed this is we could think about what the issue of the day was. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, really, we wanted to make sure we drove material into road construction. So we had the roads track. And so that was something that was very important at that time. I can imagine other states thinking about maybe a climate track, or like what Washington is doing with a reuse track. So that we're in that creation stage right now.
So will you be retiring any tracks?
To be determined. I think we'll talk to that.
Okay. Kamal, the person who asked this question, I think, thought, wow, that was an amazing experience you're having. But are you getting any pushback from what the phrase they used was mass market? I'll translate that to sort of the mainstream. Are you getting any people who are saying, this is ridiculous?
We haven't had that yet. Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? I feel like a lot of businesses are trying to figure out how to engage community. I think it's needed. So I'm guessing the answer is complicated.
Yeah.
But so far, a lot of support. We have large businesses part of it as well. So, large institutions as well in Washington and King County. So yeah, so far there's been open arms with what we're doing.
Okay, great. And let's see, Paulina, how did you focus on glass as a commodity for value-added processing?
A couple of reasons. It was a targeted material by the state, but it's also one of those Achilles heels at every MRF. I think a lot of people don't realize, especially in single stream recycling systems, the mixed glass that's produced needs downstream processing, just like a mixed bale of plastics. Can't just go to an end user. It's unusable in that state. So are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the two reasons why.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about the phone ringing. So are there opportunities for businesses that are not offering a direct product or solution to participate, or businesses that have extremely large footprints? It doesn't have to be just in the Michigan one, but are there other size businesses that could be brought into NextCycle?
Absolutely. I'll say we have, one example would be Dow is one of our partners, and they have sponsored a track to help provide stuff at the boot camp. Like they brought some of their funder sponsor dollars in to support that. They didn't want to support a particular team, but they liked the idea of innovation technology, and they were willing to put some money on the line to help support that track. So that's one example of a very big company. We'd love to bring them further in and see them, participate in more opportunities. But that would be an example. And I think that really, we need every business involved in the circular economy, right? So it could be a manufacturing company that is not using recycled content in their feedstock, but want to get there. And so we can help them with what's the landscape, what's the volume available, what specifications would you need to reach the quality goals that you have and volume goals. So I think it's totally open and endless in terms of the opportunity.
Great. Well, there was also some questions about the other side, rural, but then of course Brad's comments sort of really nailed that for us. So our audience is interested in both, of course. So how are the successful teams selected, and what are they providing as part of an application?
I'd be glad to jump in unless someone else wants to. I'd love to give Kamala. It's different in Washington, so I'd love to hear what Kamala has to say. But briefly, we have advisory panels for each track, and so they help contribute to the criteria, the selection, and the consideration of. It includes impact. It includes, is it an underserved community? It includes, like, what are the benefits to climate mitigation. So the criteria vary from track to track, but we're really looking to fill the gaps in the state. Like, how does it line with the gap analysis the state conducted in terms of where the needs are? So Paulina mentioned that glass was a targeted material. That came from the gap analysis, from understanding the data and the needs in the state. So that's just a brief framework of, there is a process. There is an advisory council of experts from across the spectrum that evaluates and considers those teams. There are varying levels of readiness, but it's really, can we meet them where they are and help them? And I'd love to see what Kamala has to say in Washington.
Yeah, we basically kind of let NextCycle do what they usually do in Michigan. So we kind of just watched. We've been in an observation mode. But the key thing was, where are we making sure we share the application? Like, how do we find more applicants from regions we want to reach? And then, yeah, we've been using very similar models they are in Michigan. We are now updating that model, and we're kind of incorporating more community language, changing some of the language, making it more accessible, creating parties to make it more accessible, and help people walk through the application. So I think more what we've been doing is on the process end, like helping people engage with it.
And Len, if I could add to
Please,
that.
Matt.
So from my perspective in Michigan, it's such a stronger program because we have those advisory panels, and they have what we have are called ambassadors. And I would say the best projects come from the community of people that we didn't know about at the state. We could put out an RFP, put it on the website, and then only those that are already in the know are coming in and applying. But what NextCycle has done is created this network of ambassadors where people are in community saying, hey, do you know about this thing? And we're getting more and better applications because of that.
Great. So Paulina, your example seemed more along the line, or incorporating at least R&D. So how far along had you been in the development of your idea before applying to the NextCycle?
Which part of our project, Lynn? Part one or part two?
Oh, part one. I mean, it seemed like you were in more of an exploratory phase.
In part one?
Yeah. Did I get confused? Are they confusing the part ones and parts twos?
Part one was the MRF upgrades with the two
Okay.
different
So then
sets of
part two.
equipment.
Yeah. So the making the MRF more future fluid. So that seems like you don't know yet, right? What's going to happen. So,
Exactly. We don't
yeah.
know what's going to fill our space. We're excited for the possibilities, but this is one of those situations where, like, unlike submitting a grant for the recycling market development, where we're like, we know we want a robot. This is the model. This is the length of the conveyor belt. We don't have that kind of certainty, because we're not the outcome. The inputs are very different, and the inputs in this case are like the humans, right? The people that are going into the care center. And the outcomes, it's not a bale that meets a certain grade of material. We quite frankly don't know how we would define what is a successful outcome of the care center. So in this case, we're very much leaning on Elisa and the RS team to help us, figure out what is the right thing to do for the community inside the care center once it's built out.
Great. And so, Brad, have there been surprises as you've been going through this process? That you didn't realize that this was an issue in our region, or you didn't realize you weren't touching this group of people. Have there been elements of totally unanticipated impacts?
I would say in just participation alone, just in 2019, we did about 1,500 tons. And in calendar year 21, we did 8,500, and we'll do 10,000 next year.
Wow.
So it's pretty clear that there's a desire. And to be fair, in 19, we were dealing just with Marquette County. And when we came online in 21, we started servicing 5 counties in Upper Michigan. There's 15. So obviously we want to get as many as we can, but I would say that's probably growth that the business case that we did with RS and JD was 4 to 5 years. And we're seeing that growth in year 1.
Gee, that's staggering. Congratulations. That's very impressive. Very impressive. Well, we only have time for, I think, for one more question, and actually looking at the wrong place for the question. So is there data available from NextCycle about the measurable impacts? Brad, for example, but are there actual reports and data available that can show the interested community what the actual impact has been?
Yeah, I would say, Elisa, if you want to talk about what we have on the website, because we didn't talk too much about that, but I would just start with definitely go to the NextCycle Michigan website. And
so NextCycleMichigan.com has so much information. We are tracking all data in many different ways. There are data visualizations. You saw some of them in Matt's presentation. We're tracking the investment. We've got a pie chart of public sector Eagle funding to private sector investment into projects. There are stories from each of the teams. There are stories of funding partners. There's so much there. So you could scroll through the galleries, see lots of photos, read full-on stories of different projects and teams. I mean, honestly, you could spend hours there, or you could just go. There's a whole resource library where you can see the gap analysis, the most up-to-date gap analysis that was conducted, where you can really get into tables and charts of, what's the opportunity, what's getting landfill by material, by region in the state. So it's very robust, and it is. It's also crowdsourced. Like if someone says, "Oh, you don't have my program on there," we'll get it on there. So it's active, live, and growing.
Great. And Kamal, is that true in Washington as well? That the NextCycle Washington has that sort of information available?
We just finished our first round, so we do have a presentation. I don't know if it's up yet, but it's pretty impressive what we've actually done in a short period of time.
Okay,
so
great.
I'll let you guys know when it's up.
Okay, great. So it sounds as though, Lisa, that there isn't one centralized NextCycle website that a person could go to see all of this, that you have to go state by state. Is that true?
I'm pretty sure there's a NextCycle website from which you can navigate to the different states. If it's not there, it will be any day now. So it's in active development if it's not already live. But certainly if you put the Google, in your search bar with the word NextCycle with the state of interest, you will find plenty there. Some great videos too. So I know NextCycle Colorado and Washington have their own YouTube channel. Right now, NextCycle Michigan's is on the RRS YouTube channel. That'll be changing in the fall. So
okay, great. Well, congratulations to everybody, and thank you so incredibly much for taking the time to prepare your presentations and to share your experience with us. It's been just wonderful. As a reminder to the audience, the recording and the PowerPoints will be available on the NERC homepage tomorrow morning. And also, while you're there, you might want to look at the agenda for the upcoming NERC Fall Conference, November 2nd and 3rd in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. And with that, again, thank you so much to everybody for your fantastic presentations and work, and have a great balance of your day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.